The scope won't stop shaking. My hands are steady. 23 confirmed kills have taught me that much. But the scope itself is vibrating, and it takes me 3 full seconds to realize it's not the scope at all. It's the ground. The entire mountain is shaking. I'm lying in a sniper hide 8,000 feet up in the Hindu Kush, and through my lens, I'm watching something that shouldn't exist. 54 enemy fighters are walking single file through the valley below, and there's a kid with them. Maybe 7 years old, maybe 8. He's carrying a red backpack, and I absolutely know what's in that backpack. Intelligence briefed us 3 days ago. They've been using kids as walking bombs, triggering them remotely when they reach coalition checkpoints. This kid is already dead, he just doesn't know it yet. My finger rests on the trigger. The math is simple. 54 militants, 1 child, 1 shot that might save 100 American lives at the checkpoint 2 clicks east. The wind is perfect. The range is 847 meters. I've made harder shots before breakfast, but my daughter turns 8 next month. And that kid in the valley, he's humming. I can't hear him from up here, but I can see his mouth moving, see the little skip in his step. He's humming and he's about to become pink mist, and I'm the only person in the entire world who can decide whether to pull this trigger in the next 15 seconds. If my story resonates with you, please hit the like button to bring a little light to this father's heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my upcoming life stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me so happy to know what corner of the country or world you're listening from. My name is James Michael Reeves. People called me Ghost in Afghanistan. Not because I was invisible, but because after what happened in those 54 minutes on November 3rd, 2011, part of me never really came back. I was 29 years old, a Marine Scout sniper with 3 tours under my belt, and a service record that looked like something out of a recruiting poster. I grew up in Bakersfield, California, hunting jackrabbits with my grandfathers. 308. Never imagining that one day I'd be hunting human beings. Never imagining that one day I'd have to choose between being a good soldier and being a good man, and that both choices would destroy me. The war in Afghanistan was in its 10th year when I found myself on that mountain. We'd killed bin Laden 6 months earlier, and everyone kept saying we were winning, but from where I was lying it looked like we were just dying slower. The thing about being a sniper is that you see everything. You see the war that the guys kicking indoors never see. The women pulling kids inside when the convoys roll through, the old men spitting in the dirt, the teenagers with cell phones photographing our positions. You see the war nobody talks about on the news. I was part of a 2-man team inserted into the mountains to provide overwatch for a forward operating base. My spotter was a kid from Tennessee named Marcus Webb, 22 years old and scared of heights, which is about the worst fear you can have when your job is climbing mountains. He was behind me when I spotted the column, when I saw the kid, when everything started falling apart. The mission was simple: observe and report, eliminate high-value targets if opportunity presented. Command didn't tell us we'd be watching child soldiers walk to their deaths. They didn't put that in the briefing. I'd been shooting men for 3 years at that point. Taliban fighters, Al-Qaeda, Haqqani network. I'd put bullets through 53 human beings, and I slept fine every single night, because they were all trying to kill my brothers, trying to kill Americans, trying to blow up schools and marketplaces. I never hesitated, not once. My record was spotless. My conscience was clear. But that was before I saw that red backpack, before I watched that little boy skip down the mountain path like he was walking home from school, before I understood that sometimes the worst thing you can do is follow orders, and sometimes the worst thing you can do is disobey them. The valley below me was called the Korangal, the Valley of Death we called it, and it earned that name 1,000 times over. It was a Taliban supply route, a training ground, a graveyard for American helicopters. The mountains rose 10,000 feet on either side, creating perfect ambush terrain. We'd lost 42 men in that valley before I ever set foot there. The brass wanted intelligence on enemy movement patterns, wanted to know where the weapons caches were hidden, wanted to know which villages were friendly and which would smile while their kids planted IEDs on the roads we drove. My job was to watch and report, sometimes to eliminate specific targets, sometimes just to count bodies and wait for extraction. Nobody told me I'd be counting down the minutes until a child exploded. Through my scope, I could see every detail. The militants were traveling light, AK-47s, no body armor, moving fast. They knew these mountains the way I knew the streets of Bakersfield. They were headed east, toward the checkpoint where Alpha Company was stationed. 37 Marines, most of them younger than me. Most of them thinking about home and hot food and whether their girlfriends were still waiting. The kid in the red backpack was in the middle of the column. Older fighters in front and behind. They kept touching his shoulder, guiding him, keeping him close. He wore a dirty Manchester United jersey, Rooney's number, I remember that, and sandals that looked 2 sizes too big. His hair was cut short except for one long lock on the right side. Traditional. His mother probably cried when they cut it, probably cried harder when they took him. Marcus was breathing hard behind me, his spotting scope trained on the same scene. I could hear him calculating angles, wind speed, the slight updraft from the valley floor. We'd worked together for 7 months, long enough that we didn't need words anymore, long enough that I knew he saw what I saw, knew what I was thinking, knew the choice I was facing. He didn't say anything. That was the worst part. If he'd told me to take the shot, I could have blamed him later. If he'd told me not to, I could have blamed him for what came after. But Marcus stayed silent, and that silence weighs more than any words ever could. I watched the column move, 800 meters, 750. The kid stumbled once, and an older fighter caught him, steadied him, whispered something that made the boy nod. I wondered if they told him he was a martyr, a hero, that paradise waited on the other side. I wondered if he believed them. I wondered if he was scared. 700 meters now. 650. My finger had been on the trigger for 3 minutes. The carbon fiber stock was slick with sweat. November in Afghanistan, and I was sweating like it was July. The tactical decision was obvious. One shot, center mass on the backpack, detonated early, saved the checkpoint. Maybe kill the kid instantly. Maybe give him a few seconds to realize what was happening. Either way, he was already dead. The moment they strapped that vest on him, he became a weapon, not a child. That's what I told myself. That's what the manual would say. That's what every instructor at sniper school would confirm. But my daughter's name is Emma, and she's 7 years old, and she has a red backpack too. And somewhere in the lizard part of my brain that's older than civilization, I couldn't separate the two. I couldn't pull that trigger. Not yet. 600 meters. The column was moving toward a natural choke point where the valley narrowed. Standard Taliban tactics. Funnel the enemy, limit their movement, maximize casualties. If that kid reached the checkpoint, he'd walk through the gate smiling. And they'd trigger him when he was surrounded by Marines. 30, maybe 40 dead. Dozens more wounded. IEDs don't discriminate. They shred everyone within the kill radius. I'd seen the aftermath before, had watched medevac choppers carry out what was left of men I'd eaten breakfast with. I knew what was coming. And still, I couldn't pull the trigger. I'd made a modification to my rifle that most snipers thought was insane. Instead of the standard Leupold scope, I'd mounted a Schmidt & Bender with a higher magnification and a parallax adjustment that let me see facial expressions at 1,000 meters. Most guys wanted the wider field of view, wanted to track multiple targets, wanted the tactical advantage. I wanted to see faces. I wanted to know who I was killing. Some shrink at Quantico would probably say I had a disorder. Some need to witness, to own my kills completely. Maybe. Or maybe I just believe that if you're going to take a life, you should at least have the courage to look them in the eye, even from half a mile away. Through that scope, I could see the boy's face. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked tired, scared. His eyes kept darting to the fighters around him, looking for approval, for comfort, for something. 550 meters. The calculation ran automatically in my head. Wind speed 2 miles per hour left to right, temperature 71 degrees, altitude correction factor 8 minutes of angle, target moving 2.3 miles per hour. The bullet would take 1.2 seconds to reach him. In that time, he'd move exactly 4.6 feet. I'd lead him by 3 inches, aim for the center of the backpack, and physics would do the rest. Marcus shifted beside me. He'd pulled back from his scope, was looking at me instead of the valley. I could feel his eyes on me, could feel the question he wasn't asking. We had about 2 minutes before the column moved out of effective range. 2 minutes to decide whether I was a Marine or a murderer, whether following orders made you a hero or just someone who could live with himself afterward. I'd spent 3 years believing I knew the difference. Turns out I didn't know anything. The Taliban had started using kids 6 months before this. Intelligence briefings showed the pattern. Boys taken from refugee camps, from villages that didn't pay protection money, from families that didn't have a choice. They'd train them for weeks, indoctrinate them, promise them paradise and glory and revenge against the Americans who'd killed their fathers, their brothers, their uncles. Then they'd strap explosives to them and send them walking. The first few got through checkpoints easy. Soldiers see a kid, they lower their weapons, they offer candy and water and help. Basic human instinct. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late. After that, we changed protocols. No unaccompanied minors near checkpoints. Anyone with a bulky jacket or backpack gets stopped at 100 meters. Anyone who doesn't comply gets shot. But this kid wasn't unaccompanied. He was surrounded by 54 fighting-age males, all armed, all moving with tactical precision toward an American position. This wasn't a civilian casualty waiting to happen. This was an enemy weapons system, and I had legal authority to engage. Legal authority. I kept repeating that phrase in my head like a magic spell, like it would make the decision easier. 400 meters now. The column was passing through the Narrows. I could take them all from here. 54 shots, 54 kills. Probably break some kind of record. But records don't mean anything when you're staring at a kid in a Manchester United jersey who's about to be vaporized because I decided he was a weapon instead of a person. I thought about Emma, about the last video call before this deployment, how she'd shown me her new backpack, bright red with sparkles, and told me about her new teacher and her new best friend, and how she was learning multiplication. I'd smiled and told her I was proud of her, told her Daddy would be home soon, told her all the lies that deployed parents tell their kids. I didn't tell her I was going to Afghanistan to kill people. Didn't tell her that sometimes those people were trying to kill me back. Didn't tell her that sometimes those people were younger than the kids in her second-grade class, and that I'd still pull the trigger if I had to, because that's what Marines do. We pull triggers, we follow orders, we complete the mission, and we learn to live with it after. 350 meters. The lead fighters were checking their weapons, scanning the ridgelines. Professional soldiers, not the usual farmer conscripts we'd been seeing. These guys knew what they were doing, knew they were being watched, knew that somewhere up in these mountains an American with a rifle was deciding whether they lived or died today. But they kept moving, kept the kid in the middle, used him as a shield because they knew we'd hesitate. They knew that American soldiers, trained in rules of engagement and laws of war and hearts and minds operations, would see a kid and freeze for just a few seconds. And in combat, a few seconds is eternity. I'd killed my first man when I was 26. Camp Leatherneck, 2009, during a patrol that went sideways fast. Taliban ambush, 3-sided kill zone, my squad pinned down and taking fire. I was on a rooftop 200 meters away, and through my scope, I could see the machine gunner who was tearing my guys apart. He was maybe 50, graying beard, probably a veteran of the Soviet War, probably been fighting foreigners his entire life. I put a 7.62 round through his chest at 217 meters, and he dropped like someone had cut his strings. My spotter confirmed the kill, called it in, and we moved to the next target. That night, back at base, I waited for guilt to hit me, for nightmares, for the moral reckoning everyone talks about. Nothing came. I'd saved American lives, done my job, followed my training. I slept fine. The next day, I cleaned my rifle and went back out. After that, it got easier. Not easier to kill, that stayed hard, stayed heavy, but easier to accept that killing was necessary, was righteous, was what separated us from them. They wanted chaos and terror and Sharia law. We wanted stability and freedom and girls going to school. The moral math was simple. Every person I killed was one less person trying to kill Americans, one less bomb maker, one less fighter. The numbers justified themselves, until they didn't. 300 meters. I could see the checkpoint now, could see the Marines manning the barriers, checking IDs, searching vehicles. They had no idea what was walking toward them. I could warn them. Marcus had the radio. but warning them didn't solve the problem. They'd close the checkpoint, the column would disperse, and tomorrow or next week, they'd try again with a different kid in a different valley. Or the fighters would detonate the kid remotely right there at the closed gate. Still kill Marines. Still win. The only solution was to end it here now, with one shot that would haunt me forever but save everyone else. My breathing had slowed without me realizing it. The scope's crosshairs drifted across the red backpack, steady as stone. I'd reached that state snipers talk about, where time stretches and the whole world shrinks to a single point of focus, where your heartbeat becomes a metronome and every breath is measured and controlled. I was ready. Physically, mentally, tactically ready. The shot was there. Perfect conditions, perfect range, perfect justification. All I had to do was squeeze 4 pounds of pressure, and this would be over. But I didn't squeeze. I held there, frozen, while my brain screamed at me to make a decision. Every second that passed was another meter closer to the checkpoint, another step toward catastrophe. I'd waited too long, thought too much, let emotion override training. The worst thing a sniper can do is hesitate, because hesitation kills. Hesitation gets your teammates killed, gets missions failed, gets you sent home in a box. We drill that out of candidates in training, teach them to trust their instincts, to shoot when the shot is there, to act instead of thinking. I'd forgotten all of that, or maybe I'd learned something that contradicted it. Either way, I couldn't pull the trigger. 250 meters. Marcus touched my shoulder, gentle. Not pushing, not deciding, just acknowledging that he was there, that whatever I chose, he'd back me. That touch broke something loose in my chest, some dam that had been holding back 3 years of deployment and killing and pretending I was fine. I wasn't fine. I hadn't been fine since the first deployment, since the first kill. Since the first time I came home and couldn't explain to my wife why I woke up sweating, why I couldn't be in crowds anymore, why I volunteered for another tour instead of staying home with my daughter. None of us were fine, we were just better at hiding it. The boy stumbled again. This time nobody caught him, and he went down hard on the rocky path. His red backpack slammed into the ground, and I stopped breathing completely, waiting for the explosion, for the premature detonation that would solve my problem by accident. Nothing happened. The kid got up slowly, brushed dirt off his Manchester United jersey, and kept walking. The fighters around him didn't slow down, didn't help, just kept moving. He was cargo to them, a weapon, expendable. And that's when I understood, really understood, what the Taliban had figured out that we hadn't. They'd found the perfect weapon against American soldiers, our own humanity. They knew we'd hesitate when we saw a kid. They knew we'd second guess, would debate rules of engagement, would call up the chain of command for authorization. They knew that our strength, our morality, our laws, our refusal to become like them was also our weakness. And they were right. 200 meters. The Marines at the checkpoint had spotted the column. I could see them grabbing weapons, calling for backup, setting up defensive positions. Standard procedure. They'd let the fighters get within 100 meters, then issue a warning in Pashto through the loudspeaker. If the column didn't stop, they'd fire warning shots. If it still didn't stop, they'd engage, but by then, if that backpack was what we thought it would be too late. The blast radius of a suicide vest is about 30 meters in all directions. Shrapnel and ball bearings extend that to 50. The checkpoint had walls and barriers, but they were designed to stop trucks, not absorb an explosion from inside the defensive perimeter. If that kid got through, he'd kill everyone there. 37 Marines. Kids from Kentucky and California and New York. Someone's son, someone's brother, someone's father. All dead because I couldn't pull a trigger. I adjusted my aim. Instead of the backpack, I moved the crosshairs up to the boy's head. Clean shot. Instant death. He wouldn't feel anything, wouldn't know what hit him, wouldn't have time to be scared. It was a mercy, really. Better than burning alive when the vest detonated, better than living with whatever psychological horror they'd put him through. One shot, end his suffering, save my brothers. The math was still simple. The morality was still clear. So why couldn't I breathe? My daughter's voice echoed in my head. The last thing she'd said on that video call, "Promise you'll come home, Daddy, promise." And I'd promised because that's what you do, even though we both knew it was a lie, knew that maybe I wouldn't come home, or maybe I'd come home changed, hollow, someone who looked like her father but wasn't anymore. I'd seen it happen to other guys. Watched them come back from deployment and not fit into their old lives. Watched marriages fall apart. And drinking problems start, and 22 veterans a day put guns in their mouths because living with what they'd done was harder than dying. I'd always thought I was different, thought I was stronger, thought I could compartmentalize, could keep war and home separate, could be a good Marine and a good father without either one contaminating the other. I was wrong. 175 meters. The crosshairs drifted back to the backpack, not the head. I couldn't shoot a kid in the head, couldn't see his face explode through a magnified scope, couldn't carry that image for the rest of my life. But maybe I could shoot the backpack, detonate it, turn away before I saw the result. Maybe I could live with that. Maybe after enough time and enough whiskey and enough therapy, I could convince myself I'd had no choice, that it was war, that people die in war, that kids die in war, and sometimes the guy pulling the trigger is doing it to save other kids, other lives, other futures. Maybe I could believe that. Maybe I could sleep at night. Maybe. Marcus whispered behind me. Ghost. Just my call sign. Nothing else. Not an order, not advice, not judgment. Just acknowledgement that the moment had come, that the next 60 seconds would define everything, would determine whether I went home a hero or a coward or something worse than both. I thought about all the training, all the briefings, all the rules of engagement meetings, where lawyers and officers explained when we could shoot and when we couldn't, explained collateral damage calculations and proportional response and the legal framework that let us drop bombs on weddings as long as there was a high-value target inside. This kid in the red backpack was a high-value target, the most high-value target I'd ever seen, because saving him meant killing Marines, and killing him meant saving Marines, and there was no third option, no clever solution, no way out that let everyone live. 150 meters. The fighters had picked up their pace. They knew they were close, knew the Marines were watching, knew that any second now the loudspeaker would crackle to life with warnings. The kid was struggling to keep up, his two big sandals slapping against the rocks, his breathing visible even from this distance. He looked exhausted. He looked like every kid I'd ever seen at Emma's school during a long field trip, tired, ready to go home, wondering why adults made them do this stuff. Except he wasn't going home. He was walking into an ambush he didn't know he was part of, wearing a bomb he probably thought was school supplies or food or whatever lie they'd told him. He was dead already. I was just deciding how and when. The radio crackled. Marcus grabbed it before I could. Overwatch, this is Alpha 1. We have visual on approximately 50 hostile fighters and one unidentified miner approaching checkpoint. Rules of engagement confirmation requested. Over. Command would take 30 seconds to respond, maybe a minute if they needed to escalate. 30 seconds of not deciding, of letting someone else carry the weight, of following orders instead of conscience. I felt relief wash through me, and immediately felt disgusted by that relief. I was looking for someone else to tell me to kill a kid so I wouldn't have to live with choosing it myself. That's what I'd become. That's what this war had made me. 125 meters. Through the scope, I could see the lead fighters raising their weapons, not pointing them yet, but ready. This was a suicide mission for all of them, not just the kid. They'd walk into that checkpoint knowing they wouldn't leave, knowing that the kid's detonation was the signal to attack, knowing that they'd trade their lives for American lives and call it victory. 54 martyrs, 54 paradise, 54 virgins or gardens or whatever promises kept them walking forward. And one kid who didn't choose any of this, who was too young to understand martyrdom or politics or holy war, who just wanted his mother and his home and to not be carrying a bomb towards strangers who would kill him if they knew what he was carrying. The radio crackled again. Overwatch, Alpha 1, authorization granted for immediate engagement of hostile column. Rules of engagement in effect. Repeat, you are cleared hot. Over. Marcus held the radio toward me, and I could see his hand shaking. He was 22 years old, and I'd just made him complicit in whatever happened next. If I shot, he'd confirm the kill. If I didn't, He'd watch Marines die. Either way, he'd carry it. We both would. That's what war does. Spreads the guilt around until everyone's covered in it. Until there's no clean hands left. Until the only question is whether you can wash yourself enough times to feel human again. 100 meters. The loudspeaker at the checkpoint boomed in Pashto. "Stop, turn around. You are not authorized to approach. Any further movement will be met with lethal force." Standard warning, repeated 3 times. The column didn't stop. The fighters knew English, knew what the warning meant, kept walking anyway. The kid looked up at the sound, confused, scared, and one of the fighters put a hand on his shoulder, urging him forward. "Keep walking. Almost there. Don't be afraid." Whatever they told him, it worked. He kept moving. I'd been lying in this position for 4 hours before the column appeared. Standard sniper protocol. Find your hide, settle in, become part of the landscape. I'd pissed in a bottle, eaten cold MRE, watched the sun move across the valley floor while calculating angles and adjusting for heat shimmer. All that preparation, all that planning, for this moment. For a shot I couldn't take and couldn't not take, for a decision that would define me forever regardless of what I chose. I'd thought being a sniper was about shooting. Turns out it was about choosing and living with what you chose after. 75 meters. Warning shots cracked out from the checkpoint. 3 rounds fired into the dirt 10 meters in front of the column. The fighters didn't stop. They never stopped. The whole point of a suicide mission was that warning shots didn't work, that self-preservation instinct had been overridden by ideology or drugs or coercion or whatever mixture kept men walking toward certain death. But the kid flinched at the gunshots, and for a second, just 1 second, he stopped walking. Looked back the way he'd come, looked at the mountains behind him, the path home, the life he'd had before they put that backpack on him. Then the fighter grabbed his shoulder harder, and the moment passed and he kept walking. I made my decision in that second. Not a rational decision, not a tactical decision, not a decision that made sense by any military standard, but a decision. I swung my rifle 15 degrees left away from the column and put the crosshairs on the fighter who kept touching the kid. The one who'd caught him when he fell, who'd urged him forward, who'd put his hand on that small shoulder like he was helping when really he was herding a lamb to slaughter. I didn't think about authorization or rules of engagement or collateral damage. I just pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked against my shoulder. The bullet took 1-2 seconds to travel 483 meters. I watched through the scope as it punched through the fighter's chest, center mass, exactly where I'd aimed. He dropped instantly, and chaos erupted in the column. 53 fighters scattered, taking cover behind rocks, raising weapons, scanning the ridgeline for my position. And the kid stood there, alone in the middle of the path, his red backpack suddenly visible to everyone, no longer shielded by the moving column. He looked tiny out there, breakable. Marcus was screaming in my ear, "What the fuck are you doing?" But I was already moving, already sliding down from our position, already doing something I'd never done in 3 years of combat, abandoning my rifle to save 1 life instead of taking many. The Marines at the checkpoint had opened fire on the scattered fighters, and the valley turned into a killing zone. Bullets ricocheting off rocks, grenades exploding, the whole mountain shaking with violence. And in the middle of it, that kid in the Manchester United jersey, frozen, not understanding why everyone was shooting, why people were dying, why his red backpack suddenly made him the center of everything. I ran. Down the mountain, through loose scree that tried to twist my ankles, past cover I should have taken, straight into a firefight that every instinct I had screamed at me to avoid. I'd spent 3 years learning to stay hidden, to shoot from distance, to never expose myself. And now I was sprinting toward 53 hostile fighters, because a kid I'd never met looked back at the mountains like Emma looked back at me when I left for deployment. Like there was still a chance someone would save him, still a chance the world wasn't as cruel as it seemed, still a chance he could go home. Bullets kicked up dirt around me. I didn't have my rifle, just my sidearm, a Beretta M9 with 15 rounds that wouldn't do shit against 53 AK-47s. But I kept running because I'd already made my choice, already abandoned good tactics for impossible morality, already decided that I'd rather die trying to save a kid than live knowing I'd watched him explode. Marcus was still screaming on the radio, calling for backup, for air support, for someone to explain why his sniper had lost his mind. I couldn't explain it. Didn't have words for it. Just knew that if I didn't run, didn't try, didn't do something insane and desperate and probably suicidal, I'd spend the rest of my life waking up at 3 a.m., seeing that red backpack in my dreams. The Marines at the checkpoint saw me, some crazy American running toward the firefight instead of away, and adjusted their fire, created a corridor for me. They didn't know why I was running. Didn't matter. When one Marine does something insane, the others cover him. That's what we did for each other. That's what separated us from the enemy. We didn't use kids as weapons. We died trying to save them. 50 meters from the boy now. 30 meters. 20. He saw me coming, saw an American soldier running toward him, and his face did something I'll remember forever. It shifted from terror to hope. He thought I was coming to help. Thought I was rescue. Thought Americans were the good guys, like in the movies, like whatever propaganda his teachers fed him before the Taliban took over. He was wrong. I wasn't a good guy. I was just a guy who couldn't pull a trigger when it mattered, and now we were both going to die for it. 10 meters. I could see his face clearly now, could see the tear tracks in the dust on his cheeks, could see his lips moving in what might have been prayer. His backpack looked heavier up close, pulling his small shoulders back. I reached him, grabbed his hand, and kept running, pulling him toward the checkpoint, toward the Marines, toward something that looked like safety, even though I knew it wasn't. Someone would have a detonator. Someone in that scattered column of fighters was watching, waiting for the moment when the kid got close enough to Americans to make his death count. I was giving them that moment, taking him exactly where they wanted him. But I didn't stop. I ran with that kid's hand in mine, feeling how small his fingers were, feeling how he trusted me completely in that moment, how he thought I was saving him when really I was probably just changing how he died. The Marines at the checkpoint were screaming at me to stop, to get down, to stay back, because they'd seen the backpack too, had recognized what it meant. I didn't stop. I ran straight through their checkpoint, past their barriers, and the Marines scattered because they understood what I was doing, understood that if that backpack went off near them, we all died, so the only play was to get as far from the checkpoint as possible and hope the blast radius didn't reach back. We ran for 37 seconds. I counted them afterward, counted every second I spent holding a bomb's hand, counted every step that kid took before his world ended. 37 seconds of running, of believing maybe we'd make it. Maybe I could get him far enough away, maybe I could cut off that backpack and throw it, maybe there was still a chance. We made it 43 meters from the checkpoint, 43 meters of hope before someone pushed a button or pulled a wire or sent a signal, and the bomb in that red backpack decided our fate for us. I felt it before I heard it, a massive pressure wave that picked me up and threw me like I weighed nothing. Then sound, so loud it stopped being sound and became pure violence against my eardrums. Then pain, everywhere, fire and shrapnel and impact. Then nothing. Just nothing. I woke up 3 days later in Landstuhl, Germany, with 73 stitches, 3 broken ribs, a shattered collarbone, and the knowledge that the kid was gone. Not just dead, gone, vaporized. The kind of explosion that doesn't leave bodies, just pink mist and red stains and DNA fragments for the forensics team. The Marines told me I'd saved them, told me that by pulling him away from the checkpoint I'd prevented 37 casualties, told me I'd get a medal, that I was a hero, that what I did was exactly what Marines were supposed to do, sacrifice themselves for their brothers. But I didn't pull him away to save Marines, I pulled him away to save him, and I failed. That's what they don't tell you about war, about impossible choices, about trying to be a good person in a place where goodness means people die anyway. They don't tell you that you can do everything right and still lose, that you can make the moral choice and watch it blow up in your face, literally, that sometimes being human instead of being tactical just means more people suffer because you couldn't pull a trigger when you should have. Marcus survived. He'd followed me down the mountain, had been close enough to get caught in the blast radius, but far enough that it only gave him a concussion and a fractured arm. We flew home on the same medevac, neither of us talking because what was there to say? I made a choice. We lived, the kid died, the mission failed. The math was simple, the meaning wasn't. They gave me the Silver Star. For gallantry in action, for conspicuous heroism, for saving the lives of American service members through selfless disregard for personal safety. The citation didn't mention that I'd abandoned my position, disobeyed protocols, endangered my spotter, and failed to prevent exactly what I was trying to prevent. The citation made me sound brave. I wasn't brave. I was broken, and I didn't know it yet. I went home to California 3 months later. Medical discharge. Honorable. They offered me veteran services, PTSD counseling, disability benefits. I took the disability, my shoulder never healed right, and I get headaches when it rains, but I didn't take the counseling, didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to hear that what I felt was normal, that it was survivor's guilt, that I'd done my best in an impossible situation, because my best wasn't good enough. My best left a 7-year-old kid scattered across a mountainside because I thought I could be Superman, thought I could save everyone, thought being a good man mattered more than being a good Marine. Emma was 8 when I got back. She showed me her red backpack, the sparkly one she'd been so excited about, and asked me to tell her about Afghanistan. I told her it was hot and sandy and far away. I didn't tell her I'd held a kid's hand while he carried a bomb. Didn't tell her I still see his face every time I close my eyes. Didn't tell her that every time she wears that red backpack to school, I have to walk away before I break down. Didn't tell her that her father came home different, hollow. That part of me stayed on that mountain, and I don't think I'm ever getting it back. I'm 35 now. It's been 6 years since those 54 minutes on a mountainside in Afghanistan. 6 years of therapy I finally accepted, of medication that sometimes helps, of explaining to Emma, who's 13 now, why Daddy can't watch fireworks on the 4th of July, why loud noises make him flinch, why sometimes he locks himself in the bathroom and breathes into a paper bag like his lungs forgot how to work. She understands more than I want her to. She's read about PTSD in school, has researched what happens to soldiers, has figured out that her father isn't broken, but he's not whole either. Marcus and I don't talk much. He stayed in, made sergeant, is on his 6th deployment. He sent me a message once, 3 years after we got home. You did the right thing. I don't know if he believed it or if he was just being kind, but I never answered because I still don't know if I did the right thing. I saved 37 Marines that day by pulling the kid away from the checkpoint. But maybe if I'd taken the shot when I first saw him, 54 minutes earlier, I'd have saved 37 Marines and 1 kid. Maybe the right thing was the thing I couldn't do. Maybe courage isn't running into explosions. It's pulling a trigger when everything human in you screams not to. Maybe I wasn't brave. Maybe I was just too weak to do what war required. The Taliban kept using kids after that day. Intelligence reports showed dozens more attempts, some successful, some thwarted. They'd found a weapon that worked, and they kept using it because war doesn't care about morality, doesn't care about childhood, doesn't care about fathers who can't sleep. War is math, and the math said kid bombs killed Americans, so they kept making kid bombs until we pulled out of Afghanistan completely and left them to govern themselves, to continue their war among themselves, to turn that country back into what it always was, a graveyard for empires who thought they could fix it. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't understand on that mountain. The choice I faced wasn't between saving a kid and following orders. It was between living with action and living with inaction, between the guilt of pulling a trigger and the guilt of not pulling it. Either way, I was choosing what would haunt my dreams. Either way, part of me was staying on that mountain forever. I chose to run, chose to try, chose to fail in a way that felt more human than succeeding would have. Maybe that makes me weak. Maybe that makes me unsuited for war. Maybe that makes me exactly what Marines should be. Men who'll die trying to save a kid even when saving him is impossible, even when the tactical decision is obvious, even when mathematics and training and doctrine all say to take the shot. I don't know if I'd make the same choice again. I hope I never have to find out. But I know this. War asks impossible questions and doesn't wait for answers. It asks you to choose between your humanity and your mission, between your heart and your training, between being a good soldier and being a good man. And sometimes, most times, you can't be both. You can only choose which version of yourself you can live with after, and hope that's enough. Emma asked me once why I kept my silver star in a drawer instead of displayed like her grandfather had displayed his medals from Vietnam. I told her some medals are for showing and some are for remembering, and mine was for remembering. Remembering that I tried. Remembering that I failed. Remembering a kid in a Manchester United jersey who trusted me for 37 seconds before the world exploded. Remembering that those 54 minutes changed everything, changed who I was, changed what I believed about war and honor, and whether any of it means anything when you're staring at a child through a rifle scope and deciding whether to pull a trigger. If I could tell you one thing I learned on that mountain that I wish someone had told me before I ever became a sniper, before I ever deployed, before I ever thought killing for your country was straightforward, it's this. In war, there are no good choices. There are only choices you can live with and choices you can't. And sometimes you don't know which is which until 30 years later when you're still waking up at 3 a.m., still seeing that red backpack, still feeling that small hand in yours, still counting the 54 minutes between spotting a target and becoming someone different, someone who couldn't pull the trigger when it mattered and who can't stop pulling it in his dreams every single night since.